Penny Boone, also known as Baby Bus, is a Cardinal. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're talking about Jeff Brom getting a commitment from the MAC Player of the Year and what that means for the Cardinals running back room in 2024. With that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Some movement in the Cardinals running back room. Penny Boone in, Isaac Guerendo out. We'll talk about both of those decisions and what these moves mean for the running back room in 2024. It seems like the Cardinals are done recruiting the position, but we'll talk about whether or not we're going to see more players enter the portal from the position, etc. So, as I mentioned, Penny Boone is a Louisville Cardinal. The MAC Offensive Player of the Year visited the Cardinals program over the weekend. It is technically still the weekend, with this episode being recorded on a Saturday night, committed on Friday night, but began his visit on Friday and made his commitment very shortly after he got onto campus, which is something that has sort of become an MO on the portal trail of recruiting for Louisville, in the matter of when the Cardinals get a player on campus, most of the time they close the deal. Jody Demling, 24/7's Cardinal Authority, tweeted out, Louisville's hosted 30 official visitors from the portal since the portal opened a couple weeks ago. Of those 30, the Cardinals have gotten 20 commitments, and it seems like they're not done with the run of commitments at this time. So we'll see who all joins the fold. There have been 4 commitments in 24 hours, and it seems like there's going to be more. I thought we talked about this, Jeff. We need to give it some time in between so you give me ample time to discuss the commitments and not feel like I have to take all week talking about the commitments that you got over the weekend, Jeff. We discussed this. No, but seriously, it's incredible what he and the rest of the coaching staff are doing in the portal, going out and getting a ton of game changers. And we talked about Louisville needing to go out and get a couple ceiling raisers. And I feel like this commitment is a ceiling raiser for the Louisville Cardinals. As I mentioned, Penny Boone, the reigning MAC Offensive Player of the Year, was phenomenal. 194 carries, 1,400 yards, and 15 touchdowns this season for the Rockets, 7.2 yards per carry. So not only was he explosive, but he was crazy efficient as well. Only had, I think he had 5 games under 100 yards, but had a 200-yard game, had a 180-yard game, close to 150. Just absolutely phenomenal, and also found the end zone 15 times. He released a top 3 last week of Louisville, Kentucky, and Florida State. I was hoping that, I was like, man, player that played in Ohio, includes Kentucky in his top 3. That is Mark Stoops' recruiting ground. I felt a little bit nervous. And then Florida State obviously not having oh gosh, why am I drawing a blank on Trey Benson? Sorry, Trey Benson going to the NFL, Rodney Hill entering the portal, Lawrence Toafili, who knows, etc. So Florida State needed a running back. Louisville's running back a little crowded, but I was a little bit worried. But when I saw that he was making a visit, some of those worries started to subside because of the success. Now, granted, it's a matter of getting a player on a visit. Scheduling one and getting to campus are 2 different things. We saw with the Nick Scourton recruitment, you can schedule a visit, but that doesn't mean a damn thing until you arrive on campus. And unfortunately for the Cardinals, that was not good news. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the players that have joined. Penny Boone, also known as Baby Bus, sort of respect to Jerome Bettis, Hall of Famer from the Pittsburgh Steelers, Super Bowl champion, who was known for his exceptional strength and size. And if you look at the measurables for Penny Boone, it's pretty clear as to where those comparisons are coming from. Boone, the Detroit native, is 6'1", 242 pounds. So obviously a strength back, but has some speed as well. Started out his career at Maryland. Didn't really get a ton of run with the Terrapins. Transferred to Toledo before the 2022 season. Had a career high in numbers, 3 rushing touchdowns, 443 yards, but he absolutely exploded onto the scene in 2023 and was top 10 in the country in rushing yards overall. He was phenomenal and going to be a player that a lot of top programs were going to go after. One thing that I found interesting is when you talk about, guys with a ton of size at the running back position, not a lot are you also factoring in the speed aspect. Now, Guerendo, who we're going to talk about here in the next segment, Isaac had a ton of size, being 6'1", 225 pounds, but he also had pretty exceptional second level speed that sort of got underrated and overlooked at times. Boone, being 20 pounds heavier, still has a ton of speed as well. There were multiple times in the 2023 season where he got close or over 20 miles an hour, reached 20 miles an hour. There was one run that I tweeted out to where he reached 21 miles an hour on a specific run, and him being able to accelerate that quickly and hit the hole and get through. It's not just being a power back that's getting him to that 1,400 number, but also the underrated speed. Now, he's not going to be a Jawar Jordan in the open field to where if you let him get through the hole, he's absolutely gone. But he is definitely bringing a different skill set to the table to where, okay, if he hits the hole, now it's like having to stop a freight train. Good luck stopping a guy that's 6'1", 240 pounds that moves the way he does and obviously is very strong running the football. So potential RB1, well, that'll be a conversation for the third segment. I think he has all of the skills to be the number one running back for the Cardinals. I think it is going to be another truly by committee approach. It wouldn't surprise me if he's the lead back early on, but I would expect guys like Don Chaney, the transfer from Miami, to get some run. Maurice Turner, potentially Keywan Brown, the true freshman, Isaac Brown, and Duke Watson, 2 other guys that, sorry, I've got the hiccups, that could be in line for carries. But one thing that with every single non-Power 5 transfer, and this really can apply to Power 5 transfers that haven't played a ton, non-Power 5 transfers, you're always wondering how that skill set and productivity translates to the Power 5. And we've seen players that have transferred from the group of 5 and non-Power 5 to Louisville, and they've been phenomenal, especially at the wide receiver position. Tyler Hudson, Jamari Thrash, Quinterio Cole, Quincy Riley, Ketro Clark. The list goes on. We've also seen situations to where things haven't worked out all that well for non-Power 5 transfers that have joined the Louisville. And this is where obviously there's a ton of emphasis on scouting and coaching and whatever may have you. But I look at Penny Boone and I look at number one with these types of players, who's going after the players. And obviously that checks that box pretty quickly. Kentucky, Florida State. I feel like there was some rumblings from the fan bases at Ole Miss and Ohio State, but I'm not sure how concrete that was. So you have the mutual Power 5 interest. And I think that just overall what Penny Boone did this past season for Toledo was exceptional. Now, the strength of schedule is not going to wow you. They didn't play a ton of great teams. They played Illinois. He had 9 for 29, only 9 carries in the season opener, 6 for 39 against Texas Southern. You look at some of his worst games in the MAC championship, 11 of 41 against Miami of Ohio, 17 of 73 against Miami of Ohio again, but we'll just have to see. But regardless, I think that RB1 or not, he's going to play a key role. And if he's not, put it this way, I don't think Louisville, with their running back room, is truly in need of a feature back that gets 75% of the carries. I don't think that was going to happen anyway, unless you got out and got a guy like Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss, which obviously that wasn't going to happen, or a player of that nature. But Penny Boone is no slouch. What he did at Toledo this past season was exceptional. He's going to be in the running for RB1 opportunities. You talk about the skill set, the measurables, the size mixed with the speed, and this is a very intriguing addition for the Cardinals, and I like it. Especially, I definitely like the addition because of the departure of both Jawar Jordan and Isaac Guerendo. Guerendo just announced on Friday that he was entering the NFL draft, and personally, I understand this move. It makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about Guerendo's year in Louisville, why this move made sense, etc., after we talk about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL regular season ends this weekend, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get 150 bonus bets. I'm sorry, 150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet. For me, my favorites are the live same-game parlays. If you go to the Explore tab, you can find some bets that they suggest to you, and the Parlay Hub allows you the opportunity to make a parlay on the fly. It's very quick and convenient. Do yourself a favor, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. A couple weeks ago, when we discussed whether or not Jawar Jordan and Isaac Guerendo were going to go to the NFL or whether they were going to return, I remember saying that I felt like one was going to go, one was going to stay. But personally for me, I felt Jordan was going to return and Guerendo was going to leave. Obviously, with Jawar going to the league, I felt like it was a very real reality going to be introduced soon that you're going to have to replace your top two rushers, because I felt like all along that Guerendo was going to go to the league. Now, apparently there was some last-minute questioning as to whether or not that was the best decision, and ultimately Guerendo, it seemed like, stayed par for the course on what to do entering the NFL draft. And it makes sense. The 6'1" native of Clayton, Indiana, spent 4 seasons with the Wisconsin Badgers. 4 seasons with the Wisconsin Badgers. Never really had a ton of breakout opportunities. 2022, he had his career high in rushing yards with 385 and 5 touchdowns, but transferred to Louisville as sort of a Robin to Jawar Jordan's Batman, and that proved to be the case throughout the year. But I think what we underestimated was just how good a player playing the Robin role could be. And there were times this season where Guerendo shined. Let's put it this way. The Cardinals don't win 10 games without Guerendo. Very true. As good as Jawar Jordan was, down the stretch when he was hurt, he obviously lost a little bit of that speed and that explosiveness. And it was Isaac Guerendo who the Cardinals turned to for some big-time performances. And I think he proved everything he needed to NFL scouts. Sure, he could have came back for another season, probably been RB1 for the Cardinals, and had over 1,000-yard season. He was extremely efficient, averaging over 6 yards per carry. He had 132 carries, 810 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Those are draftable numbers, and I think that he's going to be a guy that probably does well in combine testing. When you talk about his 225-pound frame, and you talk about the speed that comes with that, I think that there's an intriguing opportunity. Now, whether or not he gets drafted or not, I feel like he's going to get drafted. I think it's probably going to be day 3, but I still think he's going to get drafted. But I understand the move in his regard. You have to think of it in 2 ways. Number one, shelf life. It's very, very clear that that the shelf life for a running back in the NFL in terms of longevity, it's really just not there, right? I mean, you have, depending on when you enter, 8 to 9 really good years, depending on the tread on the tires. And even then, it might not even last that long. But it's seemingly, unless you're primarily a receiving back, once you hit 30, sort of when you start to plateau and then decrescendo after that. So you talk about the shelf life. Guerendo isn't getting any younger, and that's, the main thing for me is that he would have been one of the oldest guys on the team next year, 6th year of college football, would have likely had to apply for a medical waiver, but definitely would have gotten it. But at that point, you're wondering, is it worth it? And that brings me to point number 2, is how much could he truly improve his stock? Because an older running back, I feel like that's the position to where you're really, really valuing age. And when you continually, add another year onto the age, your value starts to drop a little bit in the eyes of the NFL scouts. And no matter how much you statistically improve in 2024 or another year of college football, it might be offset by the additional age. And if you're the number one running back, how much are you going to improve your stock? Like, what's the difference in getting 1,000 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns in 2024 as opposed to what he did this season, right? So I get it. I understand this. Selfishly, I don't like it because I really am going to miss Isaac. Absolute impact guy. I'll reiterate, the Cardinals don't win 10 games without him this year. Didn't have a great start to the year. Had 11 for 63 against Murray State, but had a couple games to where he didn't record over 10 carries. And then the Pittsburgh game, when Jawar Jordan got hurt, he had 13 of 38 for 2 touchdowns, and then he started to explode. Virginia Tech, 11 for 146 and 3 touchdowns. He almost had a fourth. If a holding wasn't called, he would have had 4 touchdowns and closer to 200 yards. He was phenomenal. That was his breakout game for the season. And I was like, man, he needs to get more carries. And I think that was the first time I'm like, feed the beast. Feed IG. The next game, 6 for 94 in the touchdown against Virginia. Statistically took a step back, but I won't forget that long 73-yard touchdown run that gave the Cardinals the lead late in the game. He hit that hole, and it was a house call. And phenomenal run there that gave the Cardinals the lead, and Louisville would never look back. Next week against Miami, 15 of 93 and a touchdown. Another great game there. I was actually at that game down in Miami. He was phenomenal. Didn't have the greatest game against Kentucky, 13 of 54. Didn't get a lot of run against Florida State, 4 of 10. But when his number was called against USC, Jawar Jordan not playing in that game, he had 23 carries, 161 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Fantastic. He also had 5 catches for 42 yards, which was the second highest total that he had all season. But it's awesome to go back and see the impact of a player. We talk about, wanting to develop high school guys, and I get that. And I'm not saying this as a rebuttal to wanting to bring in high school guys so they can develop. But I think that this just goes to show, the difference in changes of situation. Guerendo was always good enough to play at the Power 5. It was just a matter of the situation and the opportunity to do so. And Guerendo got the opportunity down the stretch, and he had some phenomenal performances. I think that he became a fan favorite. A lot of people were wondering, why is he not getting the ball more down the stretch? And I was wondering that myself. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Just a phenomenal season from him. He's always going to be a Cardinal forever. Hope he has a long NFL career. The decision makes a ton of sense. And we wish him the best. Selfishly, I don't like the decision. Wish he was coming back, but I get it. And it just makes a ton of sense. Thank him for everything. And I'll reiterate for a third time, the Cardinals do not win 10 games this season in first year under Jeff Brom without a guy like Isaac Guerendo doing what he did. So, Boone in, Guerendo out. It's time to talk about the running backs room, which I feel like is finalized, barring a player entering the portal. We'll talk about why the Cardinals running back room is going to be very good once again this upcoming season. We'll do that here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat. I can't speak. And their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Just last weekend, I went up to Indianapolis to go to the Colts-Raiders game and got some very, very solid tickets on Gametime last minute, 30 minutes before the game. They were the cheapest tickets out there, solid seats for the money, and we had a good time. And Gametime is the place to go to get all of your last-minute ticket needs. And it doesn't have to be sports. You can go music, comedy, theater, whatever may have you. The lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more are just some of the benefits of going with Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Penny Boone, Don Chaney Jr., Isaac Brown, and Duke Watson in, Jawar Jordan, and Isaac Guerendo out. A lot of changing of the guard for the running backs room for the Cardinals. But once again, this is going to be a very, very talented running backs room. It's a deep room. Barring someone transferring out. Now, granted, we do have to address that because bringing in two guys in the portal, you look at players like Maurice Turner, like Kewan Brown, to where you could say, you can make the case, hey, look, there's another year possibly being buried in the depth chart once again, and you might see one of those guys go elsewhere. It would make sense. I would really hate to lose either one of them because I think that they really can help Louisville this upcoming year, especially injury insurance, because outside of those four that we just talked about, the other two are true freshmen, albeit very talented true freshmen, but still true freshmen. So I think I would worry a little bit more about Turner than Kewan Brown because Kewan would just be a redshirt freshman while Turner would be I think, redshirt sophomore, if I'm not mistaken. Regardless, you don't want to lose either one. So we're operating in this hypothetical under the assumption that both will be Cardinals this upcoming season. It changes if you lose one of those guys, especially Turner, but it definitely would change it. So I don't think that the starter is already assumed. You would probably say it's Penny Boone, which would make sense. But don't sleep on a guy like Don Chaney Jr. When healthy, he is probably the most talented guy on the roster in terms of at the running back position. 94 carries last year for the Hurricanes, 478 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5.1 yards per carry. Main thing with him is staying healthy. If he stays healthy, he is a very talented player. A couple people from Miami that I trust compared him to Frank Gore with his rare mix of size, speed, and elusiveness. But even with the lofty comparisons, you still have to stay on the field. The best ability is availability, and that is definitely true. So that's something to look out for. And I think that, personally for me, it's going to be a 1A, 1B type situation. I think it's going to be a situation where you ride the hot hand, and depending on who's playing the best, you're going to see that player play more often. I think it's going to be a three-headed monster for the Cardinals. Boone, Chaney, Maurice Turner, your top three options with guys like Kewan Brown, Isaac Brown, and Duke Watson on the outside looking in. It wouldn't surprise me with a guy as talented as Isaac Brown to potentially throw a wrench in that assumption. But you could look at Watson and Brown as potential redshirt guys to then in 2024 say, boom, or 2025 say, boom, here's your opportunity. Because Chaney, I believe, only has 1 year remaining, if I'm not mistaken. It might be 2. Going to 2021 and looking at what he did in 2021, appeared in only 2 games for the Hurricanes. You have the 2020 COVID season. So if you look at that, he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. I would expect he probably only takes 1, but there's still an opportunity to where he's still able to, use that eligibility. Penny Boone has, I think it's just 1 year, maybe 2 years of eligibility there. So maybe I'm jumping the gun in that argument by saying that they're both 1 year guys, because there is opportunity to go elsewhere. But with like a player like Isaac Guerendo, you have sort of the same issue that you could say is like, hey, look, do they want a second year? Is this sort of a money year for them? Regardless, it's a good problem to have if you are a Louisville fan looking at this rotation. The amount of guys, you have essentially 6 running backs on the roster. 2 are candidates for red shirts. Keywan Brown has the potential 3-star running back from Atlanta in the 2023 class that I felt like really showed what he could do in Georgia's highest classification. Only played 1 game this year against Murray State and really balled out, but it was Murray State. So you sort of just have to go with that and understand it how it is. But like I said, I think that there's 3 players that you're looking at that you're really going to be paying attention to this year. It's the 2 transfer guys and Maurice Turner. Selfishly, I hope Turner plays more this season, because I think that he could definitely have a respectable breakout season, to where, when I say breakout, career high numbers. He had 62 carries for 284 yards and a touchdown this past year, which was sort of a step back from 2022 in terms of carries and yards. But, I mean, if he's going to get those carries, TBD, I would like to see him more involved in the receiving game. Bringing in a guy like Tyler Shuck to play quarterback might help that out. And we'll also see, with more of a mobile quarterback with Shuck that is going to utilize more RPO situations and a guy who can throw the ball down the field more, it's also going to beg the question, what are we going to see in terms of play calling for the Cardinals moving forward? So more run dominant in 2023. Maybe that was a personnel issue, or, just playing toward the strengths of the team. But you also wonder, is it going to change? And if so, how much in 2024? Great coaches adapt their offensive scheme to their personnel, well, defensively as well. They adapt scheme to personnel and depth, etc. So this is a very good running back room. There's a ton of talent. Obviously, the questions are going to be answered to where, obviously Jawar Jordan was the penciled-in starter in 2023. You would assume that Baby Bus gets that same title in 2024, but it's still up in the air, because I would caution you to write up guys like Don Chaney and like Maurice Turner. So just some food for thought. But Penny Boone was just one of the 4 up-to-date commitments that the Cardinals got in this weekend for the 2024 transfer portal recruiting class. We'll talk about the other ones like Geronte Davis, the 2 offensive linemen that the Cardinals got. Tanner Koziel, the tight end commitment from Ball State, decommitted and is staying with the Cardinals. Louisville also got a defensive back from Ohio State. There's some basketball stuff to talk about, etc. So we'll do that over the coming days. I'm actually going out of town Monday morning. Won't be back till Thursday. So my goal is to have a couple more episodes before the weekend ends that gets you caught up to date, that you can listen to at your own convenience. So just be sure to stay tuned into that. But that's going to wrap up this episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back.